as long as he stays sound, I don't see any way he's not at least running in the Triumph. And if the Triumph Hurdle was tomorrow, I'd make him an even money favourite.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Racing YouTube channel, and we're on the hunt for the next Vauban or Majborough, that next big French import. And I've got the help of Adam Mills, who's a French racing expert. Well, that's probably downplaying Adam. He's a racing expert in general, one of the best handwriting men I've ever seen as well. And I cannot wait to pick your brains, Adam. First of all, obviously, so much excitement going into this season. I know that you do so much research during July, during August. We're not too far away now. How are you feeling?
Yeah, now we're getting exciting, Josh. It's now sort of, I spend my summer after Royal Ascot is kind of head down, starting to look. The list was a bit slow to get going this year, and then within the space of 6 weeks, we've gone from 7 or 8 names to 58, which is the biggest list I've ever compiled. And when you start looking through that list, you start thinking, right, well, there's my 4 or 5 horses for the Boodles, and here's my Triumph Hurdle horses, and here's all these things Willie's got, and it's like, this is great. Can't wait. Or Toy starts next week. Oh, it's fantastic.
Well, hopefully we're going to pick your brains about some of those names on the list. And if you weren't aware of Adam's work, I'm going to link it all down in the description below. And also every year there is a list of French imports, which we are basically talking about some of the highlights on that in this episode, trying to find possibly, like you say, that next Triumph Hurdle horse or the next Cheltenham Festival winner. You never know where they might come from. But that'll also be linked down below if you did want to have a look at all of that. But time to get stuck into things. Before we go into the actual names for this year, which of the names in recent years stick out from you from a spotting them early point of view coming from France?
There'd be a few. I've had a lot of, I wouldn't say luck, but I've had a lot of success in recent years. I've had several Triumph Hurdle winners kind of picked out in August. But the horse that really got me started in kind of a public domain, I've always watched French racing, but Calixios is the one for me, because I was inspired. There's a racing pundit, or I won't name, so I don't want to humiliate him, but when Calixios made his debut for Gordon Elliott, he made the comment, that French form is terrible. It's impossible to assess it. There's no way this should be the Triumph Hurdle favourite. And I thought, oh, no, this is all wrong. Calixios won the only 3-year-old hurdle before the COVID shutdown. He won it by 12 lengths. The form had worked out. The time was great. He was easily the best 3-year-old. And thanks to Rachel Blackmore giving him an unbelievable ride in the Triumph, he won. And then that was the first time anyone really messaged me and said, actually, you know a bit about the French form. Tell me about these other horses. So Calixios means a lot. The following year, I got very lucky. I wrote a blog post. And in that blog post in August, I had 3 horses, which were Porticello, who won the Grade 1 at Chepstow for Gary Moore, Vauban, who won the Triumph Hurdle, and Gaelic Warrior, who somehow proceeded not to win the Boodles, which is one of those races that I'll never get over. But there we are. And then last year was a record year in terms of the number on the list, or it was before this year anyway. And at the start of February, I had 4 horses that I'd put forward. I suggested Melantino and Liari were the 2 for the Boodles. They went off first and second favourite. Liari pulled up, Melantino came 6th. That's life. And then I was going into February thinking, I've got Sergino and Carguess on side here. This can't go wrong. And Sergino didn't run. Would he have won? I'm not sure. I think we can all agree he'd probably been in the first 3. And Carguess did everything right. And then I had this sudden moment when she jumped the last and thought, she's empty. And there we are. But you can't win them all. And it's fascinating. But I guess the one thing I would say, I've got an edge now that I never had before, in that the better class of flat horses no longer go over hurdles. They go to Hong Kong and Australia. So if you want a good 3- and 4-year-old novice hurdler, you've got to go to France. So having that edge is massively significant. Last year's Triumph, 6 of the first 10 ran in France and were on the list, and I had the form in the book. So that gives you an idea of kind of the dominance. And I'm not the only person who appreciates that, as we'll probably come on to in a minute. A couple of the top trainers have worked out France is the place to be. So if you know the French form, you've got a massive edge at this time of year.
They have worked that out, definitely. But that's an impeccable record, and hopefully it can continue in years to come as well. Okay, a couple of names on the list that really caught my eye that I wanted to pick your brains about. The first one is a 3-year-old that's moved to Willie Mullins for €315,000. Charles?
Yeah. So Charles was sold at Arcana for €315,000. He's a Churchill gelding. The breeding would sort of suggest that this is going to be a talented 3-year-old, but he's kind of come a very unusual route. He made his debut on the all-weather down at Poe in the south, which is the all-weather track at Poe is a very deep poly track. It's kind of, they have winter all-weather racing there. And you would not have watched his first 2 starts and thought, oh, this could be a Willie Mullins type triumph horse. Then he got on the turf at Bordeaux. He won a Class 1, and then he finished second in a listed race, the Derby du Midi, which is a sort of a Prix de Jockey Club trial. He split 2 horses, Civian and Soldier's Fortune. They're both rated 102. Charles came from the back and ran through that day, so he's probably run to 100 on the flat. If he's run to 100 on the flat, he's got to be a Triumph Hurdle contender. I get very good Vauban vibes from this kind of purchase. That the agent at the sale was on Equidia afterwards, and he said, well, we bought him with a part of the Willie Mullins team because he's Willie's type of horse. He's a 3-year-old with hurdling potential who can then go back on the flat. So with Charles in my head, and I'm not sure if it's Willie's head as well, but certainly in mine, I'm thinking, right, the Copper Horse Handicap at Royal Ascot next year is the ultimate aim. They'll probably send him over hurdles. He should, realistically, if he takes the hurdling, be a Triumph Hurdle contender, because his flat form would suggest that he's more than capable of being a 110 rated flat horse, in which case that should be enough to make him competitive. Is he the best horse in Willie Mullins' yard? Well, probably not, but he'd be in the top 3 if you ask me to rank Willie's purchases this summer.
Very exciting. We might get onto a couple of those later. Just on him, so you're looking at the French form, you're looking at his early career as well, and then how he's going through his races. Do you look at size at all? Because obviously a lot of these horses are not as developed as like a 6-year-old Brave Man's Game was, and it's a very different type of horse. How do you work that out? Can you try and work out if they're going to be good jumpers, where they've come from, anything like that?
When they come off the flat, you have to take a bit of a pinch of salt. It's an old cliche that French racing is slowly run, but it is. We have to admit that 80% of races are 3 furlong sprints when they canter round. And what you have to sort of try and quantify is, if you take Charles, for example, he won his maiden on the all-weather at Poe. Well, he's probably only had to run to a mark of 70, 72 to win that maiden. But what I'm then looking for is, right, on his next start, he goes into a conditions race, he wins that. Then he goes up in class again, he wins that. What I'm always looking for is to try and compare him to the other horses he's running against, but also to try and rank and think, right, is he a horse who's suited by French racing? Because there are some horses who are just suited by that slow sprint kind of approach. Or is he a horse where there's a lot more under the bonnet? So in Charles's case, I think there's loads more to come. I think actually he will be much better suited by a bigger field and a stronger pace. Every race he's run in so far has been a typical sort of French race where they'll get to the 3 furlong pole and then everyone will sprint and we'll see where he comes out. And I think he looks the type to me who's going to really enjoy 2 miles over hurdles. And they're the kind of horses that I'm really looking for. Is kind of, it's not just anyone could win a race in France, but actually, are they a horse who's won a race in France despite the conditions, or have they won it because of the conditions? He's won it despite those. And I think when Willie gets hold of him and they get him in a nice, strong rhythm and he's got a good gallop to aim at, he's going to improve another £10 at least.
Well, you've made me very, very excited to see Charles. You said that he's possibly one of the top 3 new French 3-year-olds in Willie's yard. Another one who's being talked about, there's a few whispers actually about this one, Willie de Huel. Richie now owns him. He's a 3-year-old with Willie Mullins. Is he another one of those top 3 possibles?
Oh, he's the daddy. This is the number one. All summer long, I get DMs on Twitter and through my website and things. People going, "Oh, where's this French horse gone? What do you think of this one?" And this is the number one name because he was marked as exported. I think one of the big Twitter accounts said, "Oh, he's been exported." No one knew where he'd gone. There's all these rumours about these different yards. But what's really significant with Willie de Hall is that he's gone to Rich Ritchie and he's gone to Willie Mullins, and they don't generally make mistakes with their French purchases. It's a slightly unusual situation in France in that this is the second year in a row that the very best 3-year-old is not going to be sold. Last year it was Jigme. He was by far and away the best 3-year-old in France, but he won the Prix Cambacérès, which is the sort of French triumph hurdle in November, and he's gone off the stud. This year's exactly the same. Nietzsche is again with the roll-on team. He's being aimed at the Prix Cambacérès, but he's been bought specifically with the aim of winning that grade 1 as a 3-year-old and then going off to be a stallion. Willie de Hall is the only horse who's laid a glove on him. He was second to him in the Prix Go-Ahead, and I love this horse. He's by Beaumec de Hall now. Beaumec de Hall is kind of one of the more fashionable sires, is making his way in the game. His stats aren't as good as they perhaps should be. He's got about a 10% strike rate, but what's noticeable with him is year on year he's getting better and better mares. And Willie de Hall looks to be his best. He won the same race that Calixios won at Compiègne, which is the first 3-year-old hurdle of the season, the Prix de Poulard. He won that really easily. The horses he beat would now be rated 136, 126, 138, 125. So on debut, he's probably topped 130. Then he went to Auteuil, ran in the Prix Go-Ahead. He was only 2 lengths behind Nietzsche. On my figures, on his second start, he's run to a mark of about 138. And he's 10 lengths clear of the rest. But most importantly, he's come from Arnaud Chai, who is at the present the best trainer in France. If you ask people to name French jumps trainers, they might give you Guillaume Macaire. At a push, someone might say Francois Nicole, and then you'd be struggling unless you're a real dedicated fan. But Arnaud Chai is an absolute genius at his work. He brings his horses on at the right time. A lot of his are held and they're given time to develop. So I think it's significant that Willie de Hall was ready to go in March. Bang, goes in first time, runs to a really high level at Auteuil. He is the Triumph Hurdle favourite, and at the time we're recording, he's been heavily backed because the news broke last week that he's with Rich Ritchie. Would I want to take 8-1 about anything for the Triumph at this time of year? Maybe not, but I don't, as long as he stays sound, I don't see any way he's not at least running in the Triumph. And if the Triumph Hurdle was tomorrow, I'd make him an even money favourite. So he is, until something improves past him, he's the best 3-year-old purchase this summer by some distance.
That is very, very, very exciting. Very much looking forward to him as well. It looks like Willie's going to have a formidable 3-year-old team. Just before we move on to another one, who would you say is the third of those best Willie Mullins possible recruits?
Oh, who would I give you as the third one? There's another one with Kenny Alexander called Mercia.
Right.
And if Charles gives me Vauban vibes, then Mercia gives me Carguess vibes. She's a listed herd win in France. Runs in the Kenny Alexander colours. I think with her £7 allowance, she's another Triumph Hurdle contender.
He's going to have some team. Right, another horse who's a little bit older, staying in Ireland. I don't follow French racing too much, but I recognise the name. July Flower has gone to Henry de Bromhead for €350,000.
Yeah, July Flower is a very talented horse. She's a Grade 1 winner of the, I guess you'd almost call it the French champion bumper. It's the Prix Jacques de Vienne, which is the Grade 1 flat race for AQPS horses, been run at Fontainebleau. That race has quite a good recent pedigree. So the 2021 renewal, Irish Point beat Ile-Francais, which is, an example of what that race can throw up. She's now 2 from 7 over hurdles, but she's got Grade 1 placed form. She's been placed in the French champion hurdle, placed in the Prix Renaud de Vivier, which is the 4-year-old hurdle. Now, beaten soundly by a superstar French stag called L'Sange Bleu, but has still probably ran to marks in the 150s. She has had a go in the UK already, and they brought her over for in my head, I'm old school, it's the Tolworth, but it's now called the Formby at Aintree on Boxing Day. Never travelled a yard. I think they were rolling the dice when she probably wasn't ready. But 350k is a big price tag, but it's important to remember that there's already a Grade 1 on the CV. So there is some potential there. Certainly, I would expect July Flower to be running in the best races, but crucially, not being a novice makes it slightly different in terms of how they campaign her. So we shall see, but I think there's enough ability there to suggest if she can run in Grade 1 races in France, she should be running in Grade 1 races in Ireland and the UK.
Yeah, well, she's an exciting 5-year-old. Coming over here, the most expensive horse on your list was a British purchase, which was actually quite a nice thing to see. Mambo number 5, €450,000 to Ben Pauling. Obviously, he's had a tremendous couple of years. Last year, we saw some really, really exciting horses for the future. Win for Ben, Diva Loon as one of those. Could Mambo number 5 also be one of these?
He could be. He certainly could be. I think the price tag of 450k is obviously the headline grabber. But what's noticeable this year is there's only 2 reasons that the French horse doesn't go to Willie Mullins. The first reason is that Willie Mullins' team look and decide that's not a horse for us. I don't think that's the case with this lad. The second reason is that the new connections, particularly those in the UK, have paid absolute top dollar to buy the horse. And that's the case here with Mambo number 5. He's had 3 starts. He's got form with Nietzsche Has, and he's got form with Willie de Houle. He was 17 lengths behind Willie de Houle in the pre-go-ahead. So that's an idea of the gap he's got to bridge. But I think what's crucial with this lad is he's still a novice. He hasn't won a race yet. So that gives them a few more options. Francois Nicole gave him plenty of entries. I think he ran to a reasonably high level in France. If I was being critical of him, in his last start in the pre-rocking chair, I think he should have won. Turning for home, you'd think he's going to win, and he gets picked off late on by Raffles Dolce Vita, who's a decent horse, but not a superstar. And I just wonder if this lad's quite got the speed, particularly for spring ground. Does shape like a horse who's probably got a bit of a frame to fill out. But what I would say with Mambo number 5 is he's run to a high level, but he's had 3 starts. And because he's had 3 starts, the French handicap has given him a mark. And he's given him a mark of 64 kilos, which means if he was entered in a British handicap hurdle, the mark would be 128. Now, I don't know Ben Pauling and I don't know the connections, but surely the conversation has been had where they've gone, 128 is very tempting. The fact that he hasn't won a race would suggest to me that I don't think we'll see him running in a juvenile hurdle in the middle of the week to win $4,000, because I don't think they'll want to risk his novice status for what is, quite frankly, very low prize money. And if he runs in the UK before he runs in a handicap, the British handicapper will get a chance to play around with that mark. Whereas if he goes straight to, well, let's hypothetically say the Boodles, if that was what they were aiming at, he could run off 128, which obviously they've done before with Bad, and there's been a few others that have gone straight to the race. Do I think he'd win the Triumph Hurdle? No. I think there are other French horses with more pace and probably more ability at this stage, but he's got some maturing to do. And I think you'll probably see them rolling the dice quite highly with him, with a view that we'll either pick up a very nice pot or we'll have a novice for next season with plenty of experience. If I'm being honest, if you'd said to me at the start of the year, Adam, tell me who's going to be the most expensive French purchase this year, I would never have guessed Mambo number 5. So there is some context needed to be added to that sales price. But he's a very nice horse. And I think we also need to bear in mind there aren't that many of the top French prospects who've ended up in the UK. So certainly before the Irish arrive, there's every chance he might pick up a good pot.
Yeah, and obviously it's a big fee for the horse, but you have to also remember that there was an underbidder, and that might be the Willie Mullins of the world, or the Henry de Bromheads, or the Gordon Elliots. So they clearly could have been interested, and Ben's just gone the extra mile to make sure that he's got him. So must be a very exciting horse. Right, a couple of others. There's 58 names on the list. I know we've talked about 4 or 5 actually with the extra Willie Mullins one. Thank you very much. But are there a couple that you're specifically excited about that might not grab headlines as much as these 4?
Yeah, definitely. I've tried to highlight the ones that haven't gone to Clasutton, because I think this is where there are good horses that people may not necessarily look at. The first is a 3-year-old who's joined Paul Nicholls called Sauvignon. Sauvignon is the best 3-year-old in the UK. Whether that's good enough to be the best 3-year-old around, wait to be seen. But what first of all catches the eye is his pedigree. He's by Inns of Court, but he's actually a half-brother to Sauterne, who won last year's Prix de Moulin at Paris-Longchamp. You wouldn't normally expect to see the half-brother to a Group 1 flat winner going straight over hurdles, but he was owned by the Dubois team, who tend to place their horses on a basis of which career will suit them best, rather than where does sort of social graces suggest we should be running. So they sent him over hurdles. He won his debut at Lyon. It was a very slowly run affair, and it developed into a real dash, which on his flat breeding massively suited. He just sprinted past them in the closing stages. But he kind of took the form, I guess winning at Lyon I would class the same as perhaps winning at Plumpton on a Monday afternoon. It's a lower level of race, but it's a nice introduction. He then went straight to Auteuil. He's a listed winner at Auteuil. He won the Prix Stanley. He beat Sony Bill, who's actually now joined Willie Mullins, so you have a good form line to follow there. Got plenty of speed, and I really like the way that he knuckled down in the Prix Stanley. He stuck his head down, got his head back in front in the closing stages. He is bred to be a precocious 3 and 4 year old. He's not the type who's going to develop into a 3-mile chaser over time, but the fact he's already a listed winner does tie their hands a little bit as to what they can do. I would be very surprised if we don't see him at Cheltenham for one of the Triumph Hurdle trials before Christmas. I think he's the best 3-year-old in the UK. Paul Nicholls has a good record of kind of getting these French 3-year-olds. He's got a great record in races like the Adonis at Kempton, the 3-year-old race they have at Haydock before Cheltenham as well. They're the kind of races that I think we'll see Sauvignon running in, and I think he'd probably pick up at least one of those. Is he a Triumph Hurdle horse? He's Britain's best hope, but that in recent years has not been good enough. And I think while he probably will end up running in the Triumph, he's going to find one or two of the Irish trained horses too good. But that being said, the Irish won't be here before March, hopefully. So there's every chance that Sauvignon is going to develop into a really good 3-year-old.
That's exciting. That people that watch the podcast will know that I'm a bit of a sucker for a Paul Nicholls young horse who's very, very exciting. I was obviously one of those that got sucked in by Solo when he absolutely hacked up in the Adonis. I was all over him, loved him, and tend to get carried away by any Paul Nicholls exciting youngster. So Sauvignon, I'm sure, is going to be spoken about an awful lot on the podcast over the next year or the next season. Is there another one that you quite liked?
Yeah, this one is well, he's not left field because he's a £300,000 purchase, but there's a horse called Kill Game who has joined Henry de Bromhead in the Robcour colours. He's only had one start for Gab Leenders, but his start was he finished second in a 4-year-old hurdle at Auteuil. The winner was King Conti, who's won a couple of times, and King Conti's style of running is basically to go 10 lengths clear at the front and try and pinch the race. And he's done it a couple of times and he's won. Kill Game was sort of given a gentle introduction and then allowed to make ground, and he scythed through the field from the third last to the line. He was the fastest horse in the finish. The winner got first run on him. But what's most significant about this form is the horse in fourth is a horse called Colo Chico, who after finishing fourth here went on to win the Grade 1 Prix Ferdinand Dufour at Auteuil in May. This is the strongest 4-year-old hurdle form in France this year. Kill Game finished second on it and was almost immediately sold for 300,000. Still a novice, really exciting 4-year-old to be going to Henry de Bromhead. I will be stunned if this isn't a graded horse. His debut just blew me away. For a horse to sort of make that kind of ground at Auteuil was superb. The form's worked out so well. But I think because he's only had one start and because he's gone to Henry de Bromhead in Ireland, there's a chance that he might well be underestimated. And I think this is one of the best purchases I've seen outside of Willie Mullins for some time.
Very exciting. An awful lot. So if he would have gone to Willie, say, do you think it's just a case that people would just be talking about him a lot more with regards to those big races in March?
Yeah, this is something that I've noticed recently is there's this sort of assumption that, if it hasn't gone to Willie, it can't be a good horse. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you were to ask me, the list has got 58 on it. If I had to rank them, Willie's probably got 15 of the top 20. But there are certain ones, admittedly, where connections have paid big money. But if Kill Game went to Willie Mullins, he would be one of 20 good novices that they've got. Henry de Bromhead obviously has his own set of very good novices as well. But I think it will actually suit the horse not to be in Willie Mullins' yard because Willie likes to sort of separate his good prospects. They all get their own maiden hurdle before they ever meet. Henry tends to be a little bit more forward in some of his novices. And I think Kill Game is the type of horse who might end up being I want to call it the Ballymore, but it's the Gallagher's now, is it? The middle distance novice hurdle, that kind of campaign. The Lawless of Naas would be a race that I've sort of penciled next to his name of kind of, if he won his maiden hurdle, he won it well, they'd probably roll the dice there. Rob Corr obviously have a quite a good record in that race.
Yeah.
But they went to 300,000 because he's a very good horse. And whoever looked at that form at Auteuil worked out, this is really going to work out as a good race. The time was good. Everything panned out really well. I'm so excited about him. But the advantage we have is because he's with Henry de Bromhead, you're going to get 4 times the price than you would if he was with Willie Mullins.
And just looking at last year, obviously a different background, but Slade Steele had run so many good races before. He went and won in March. Maybe if he was trained by Willie, he'd have been shorter on the day. I know he was still fancied, but you definitely get more of a price with regards to going to Henry de Bromhead or even a Gordon Elliott or even those just top trainers that aren't Willie Mullins. So I completely agree with you there. Right. Thank you so much for that. That was really, really cool to listen to. And it's got me very excited about the young horses. Very quickly, I know you follow the French stuff really, really closely. Last year we had Ile Francais come over for the Courtauld Star, and he was so impressive. I've not seen anything like it. It was ridiculous. The way that he seemed to love Kempton, so impressive. They're talking about King George. They were talking about King George afterwards. They were talking about Gold Cups. Are we likely to see him? Is he back in training? Are we likely to see him in this country? Yeah. Is he going to go to the King George?
He is back in training. Noel George, I heard yesterday saying, he's back in training. The plan is to bring him back on the 29th of September at Auteuil. There's quite a good race that fits in there. Their main aim is the King George at Christmas. That is the sort of the main aim for the season, which it's interesting to hear that because there's actually a Grade 1 chase at Auteuil in November that's worth twice as much as the King George. So the fact that they're deciding the King George is the main aim is certainly interesting, obviously with the ownership and everything. That makes sense. He was disappointing in the spring. There's no hiding that. But it's actually the second year in a row that in the spring things haven't gone to plan. In 2023, they brought him back thinking he'd be a French champion hurdle prospect. Thelem and Hermes Bay kicked him out of the way and they decided to draw stumps, bring him back in the autumn. I think we all saw how unbelievably impressive he was on Boxing Day. If he's back to that kind of form, surely he should be King George favourite, would be my opinion. But I think you've got to see him back to confirm that. Noel George sounded really positive when I heard him in an interview yesterday. I think the King George is made for him because of the nature of the track at Kempton and his running style. I wouldn't back him for the Cheltenham Gold Cup with my ex-wife's money because I just don't think his running style, 3 Mile 2 and Cheltenham suits. But he is so exciting. And when he gets into a rhythm, he's one of those horses, you could just watch him go around all day.
I'm sure many people that are watching this will be thinking, right, do I need to back him for the King George? But then they're probably worried, could he not run? I think I saw a quote or two and they were suggesting there was another race possible. How likely is Ile Francais to run in the King George? What would you say? Is it a 1-4 shot? Is it 1-20 shot? Is it an even money shot? Where would you price it up?
If you ask me what price would he be to run, I'd say probably even money. Because I think they will have looked at Kempton last year and thought, my God, he loves Kempton. Let's get that as the aim. I think Noel George is itching to have a big winner in the UK. Because I think Noel George takes the view, if I can get a big winner in the UK, there'll be a huge raft of British and Irish owners who'll think, I'll tell you what, I'll send him some horses. And it worked last year. JP McManus has 3 horses in training in France. They're all massive purchases and they're all with Noel George. And I think he sees British racing partly because he's got British owners, but also because he sees it as an advertising board effectively. He said in his interview, I think yesterday was with Nick Luck, and he said, we'll run on the 29th. We'll see how that goes. If that goes well, we want to get one more run into him, whether that's in the UK, whether that's in France, they haven't decided, with a view that we want to have a bit of freshness still in his legs when he gets to Christmas. I think they're still learning about the horse. And I think what they learned last year was they kept him on the go from June all the way round to March, and he was over the top. So I think this year you'll see him slightly more conservatively campaigned. Yeah, I think an even money is probably fair. You never know. He ran so flat in March. I'd want to see him do it. How I plan to attack it is I shall be watching that race on the 29th with the anti-post page for King George open at the same time. And if halfway round I think he's going well here, in I'll go. Something that's important to remember is so many French horses are sold that the pool of older horses still running in France is extremely shallow. So it's highly likely when he runs in that race on the 29th of September, he could have 2 stone in hand. Mm-hmm. What that sometimes creates the illusion of is that Ile Francais and other good horses are winning by half the track. Therefore, they are at the absolute top of their game. And on other occasions, it can actually be, well, we can all agree Ile Francais is probably a 160-plus chaser, and he's beating 2 horses who'd be rated 140. So you do need a bit of context. But that's how I plan to attack it. It's on the 29th. I'll just be sitting there, and if he's jumped the first 5, all right. I think at the moment he's about 7-1 in some places. That'll do for me, because I think the King George will suit him perfectly if he's fitting well.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not going to be alone with that one now. I think there'll be plenty of viewers out there on the 29th. Okay, and another star in France that has been flirted with the Stayers Hurdle a couple of times, the Lem. Is that going to be the plan?
It is the plan at the moment. It is the plan at the moment. The plan they announced 2 weeks ago was, we've got a very set plan with the Lem. He's had his operation. He's back. He's in full work. We're going to go prep run at Auteuil, the Prix d'Automne, which is the Grade 1 at Auteuil in November. If that goes to plan, we'll go to the long walk at Ascot to get him used to British hurdling, and then we'll go to the Stayers Hurdle at Cheltenham. This time last year, I could not get enough money on the Lem for the Stayers Hurdle because I thought he was at the peak of his powers. I think you and I, Josh, can agree that the Stayers Hurdle is not the deepest of divisions by any means. And I thought the Lem would win that by half the track. And when it was announced at the beginning of February that he was out, it was an earth-shattering blow to my anti-post market. But I also would be of the opinion that last year was the Lem's time. I think he was at the peak of his powers. This is the plan, but it's also important to remember he's been on the go since he was a 3-year-old, which means he's been schooling since he was 2. This will be his 6th season in work. It's asking a lot to come back from an injury like this, so it is a case with him of let's see how the prep run goes. The key race, if you're wanting to get involved in the Lem, is to wait for the Grade 1 at Auteuil in November. The winner of the French Champion Hurdle this year was Losange Bleu. Losange Bleu is a monster of a horse. He is an absolute machine around Auteuil. People will pick holes in his form and say, oh, he only beat Hewick by half a length. You've got to ignore that. He hit the front far sooner, and Hewick had the stand rail bias to help him. If they met again, Losange Bleu would beat Hewick by 10 lengths at least and with a fairer run. So I think the big thing connections we'll look at with Lem is, can we pinch another French Grade 1 at Auteuil? If we beat Losange Bleu, we've still got the same horse we had before, in which case all systems go for Cheltenham. That would be the way that I think they'll look at it. Personally, for myself, I haven't backed him this year. I felt last year was the time, and I think the Lem has got to prove that he's the same horse he was. If he does, he'd have a great chance. He'd have an absolutely great chance. Don't worry about the track or the hurdles. People just don't understand how good this horse is. He's an absolute superstar, one of the best stayers I've seen, certainly the best since Barracuda, I think, in terms of French stayers. But you just don't know with that injury. And he's people look and think, oh, he's 7 rising 8. That's not that old, but it is in terms of a French horse because he's been on the go for a very long time. He's in the right hands. If he wins the Grade 1 in November, that's when I'll back him for the Stayers.
Fascinating. Looking forward to hopefully seeing him over here before Christmas as well, which would be a real bonus. But Adam, thank you so much for your time. You've made me extremely giddy about the start of the new season and about the new French horses going to those big yards, the Triumph Hurdle, the novices, and I'm just getting carried away listening to it all. So thank you so much. I'm going to link everything if you want to check out Adam's work, and the list of 58 horses will be down below. Please do go and check that out. It's months and months of research, and it's brilliant to look at and read, and it gets you also very excited. And you're one step ahead. I feel like I'm one step ahead just looking at the spreadsheet, because you get those early names that could be featuring in those big races in March or at Punchestown or at Leopardstown or at Aintree as well. It's not all about Cheltenham. I need to remind myself that sometimes. But thank you so much, Adam. Best of luck for this season, and thank you very much for coming on.
Brilliant. Thanks, Josh. Really appreciate it.